Hey everybody, it is China Williams from the CW Reads, and today I will be talking about the books that I read in the month of March, as well as my April TBR. I normally don't do TBRs because I am a mood reader, but in the month of April I am participating in a 4-week readathon hosted by G, which actually started yesterday, April 2nd, and will continue on through April 28th. And it is called the Magical OWLS ReadAthon, which is centered around the OWLS examinations of Harry Potter. In the month of March, I read a total of 6 books, which is crazy and definitely made up for my lack of reading in February. So since it's going to be a pretty long video, let's just get into it. The first book I read in the month of March, which I actually finished, or started in February and finished in March, was The Magicians by Lev Grossman. For that, I read the audiobook, which was a really good route. I know a lot of people had different views on this book. There were a lot of mixed reviews on it. Not a lot of people liked it, but I actually really liked it. And the main reason why I did read it was because I really enjoyed this show on Sci-Fi. And so I thought the audiobook would be a good route for this. But basically, The Magicians follows a character named Quentin Coldwater, and he has been obsessed with these books set in this magical land of Fillory. And he is a senior in high school and is still obsessed with these books and just can't seem to get away from them. And then one day, is unexpectedly dragged into this magical school where he has to take this examination, and he actually is accepted. And him and his best friend Julia are actually both taking part in this examination, but only Quentin passes, Julia does not. And Julia's memory is actually erased of these events ever happening. But Quentin is accepted, and he basically goes to the school and learns how to practice magic. He meets a group of friends when he figures out what type of magic he is performing. After graduation, they actually discover that the land of Fillory is real, and this kind of takes a turn in Quentin's life because he really doesn't know how to handle this, and he realizes that Fillory isn't all what it seemed. I really like The Magicians, as I said. There are a few things that kind of bother me, especially with the characters. They aren't likable characters, and I know that's a problem that a lot of people had. Quentin was kind of dramatic and does show signs of depression. He's kind of like miserable throughout the whole novel, even when he is introduced to this magical land. I did really enjoy the plot line and the magic system within it. It really took me back to reading Harry Potter, and these kids are going to this magic school and learning magic, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And I also really liked the world of Fillory. I thought it was really lush and also very dark, and those are types of worlds that I'm really into. I ended up giving The Magicians a 4 out of 5 stars, and I will definitely be continuing on with the series, especially the audiobook route, because the narrator, Mark Bramhall, he did a really good job narrating, especially even with the female characters. The next book I read, I was actually given to for free in return for an honest review from Of Tums Publishing. If you don't know Of Tums Publishing, created by Ben Alderson, who is a fellow booktuber, he sends free e-copies to get more reviews for his books, for the books that he publishes. And the book that they sent last month was Colliding Skies by Debbie Sackett. This is a sci-fi novel that follows our main characters, Sky Riley. And all of her life she has been very interested in science fiction and astronomy, and she loves stargazing and all of that. Until one day a alien race actually comes and takes over Earth. They promise a land free of disease, free of poverty, global warming, and famine, but really they have something else bigger planned. Sky actually meets a boy named Ethan when the alien race, the Sellians, arrive. And he is the son of the Magistrate Council, or one of the members of the Magistrate Council. And when they find out about this relationship, they are willing to do anything to destroy it. And that is when Sky's life kind of turns upside down and has to choose between humankind and her family, or Ethan and this mysterious alien race. So I actually enjoyed Colliding Skies for the most part. It was definitely fast-paced, and I loved the science fiction elements of it. There are parts of the book where Ethan takes Sky time traveling throughout outer space and throughout his lands, and those parts I really did enjoy. I thought Debbie Zackin did a wonderful job at writing those time travel parts. But I didn't really like a lot of the characters. I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of character development, and I honestly didn't really like the relationship of Sky and Ethan. I thought Ethan was very creepy at times. He would stalk Sky, and I actually really liked Sky and Taylor, who was her boyfriend in the beginning of the novel. Even though he did have some issues later in the book, I felt like he had the most character development, and he was really enjoyable in certain parts. He had an alcoholism problem, and so that kind of strained their relationship, but I still really enjoyed Taylor as a character, and I really enjoyed Sky's friends as opposed to Sky herself. I thought Sky was kind of rash in making decisions, and characters were kind of lackluster in the story for me, but the action and the sci-fi elements were really impressive. And I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars because I really did have a good reading experience. It just wasn't an in-depth sci-fi novel, which are both sci-fis that I really enjoy. So yeah, the third book that I read, Fishes by V.E. Schwab. After reading Colliding Skies, I was in a science fiction mood, so I picked up Vicious because V.E. Schwab actually announced that her second novel, Vengeful, is coming out towards the end of this year. And I've been following her on Instagram, her writing updates of Vengeful, because I love V.E. Schwab. The Conjuring of Light series is one of my favorite series, and I just really want to get into more of her writing, and she's actually coming out with 2 books this year. But Vicious actually centers 2 main characters, Victor and Eli, and in college they were really best friends. They had a shared love of this thesis that Eli came up with about adrenaline and near-death experiences and supernatural events. Possibly those things can possibly lead up to someone having extraordinary abilities, and they actually experiment on this thesis, and both of them discover extraordinary abilities, and then that kind of takes a turning point in their relationship, and they become arch nemesis. So this book follows 2 different timelines of when they're in college and they are experimenting this thesis, and the other timeline is 10 years later when they are basically trying to destroy each other's lives. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was mainly because of the characters that really drew me in, and also this idea that adrenaline and near-death experiences could possibly create an extraordinary ability. I thought that was really interesting, and I thought V.E. Schwab did a brilliant job at crafting that thesis. You could tell that she did a lot of research on that, which I really appreciate. This was just a really good book. It was really fast-paced, and I kind of flew through it, and I'm really excited to get into Vengeful. So that is Vicious. The next book I read is The Crown's Fate by Evelyn Skye. This is the second novel of The Crown's Game, which was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And this book follows shortly after the events of the end of the Crown's game. I don't know if this is just going to be a duology or a trilogy. I definitely think it can stand as a duology. So basically this series is set in a fantasy imperial Russia where their magic exists, but not a lot of people are aware that magic exists. And there is actually a magical duel of two enchanters. In this story, it is Vika and Nikolai. And they are competing to stars appointing enchanter. They have to blind the audience that magic actually exists. So they kind of have to create illusions so that the audience isn't aware that magic actually does exist. I really enjoyed the first book a lot. I thought the fantasy Imperial Russia was a really cool setting, and you could tell that Evelyn did a lot of research on Imperial Russia because it actually felt like magic could exist in Imperial Russia using historical figures and historical time events of that era. I also really loved the magic in this story. Vika had an interesting power where she could conjure snow, and Nikolai could conjure bridges and see through walls. I've never really seen that type of magic in any other fantasy series, so I thought that was really interesting. I didn't enjoy the second book as much as I did the first book, so 4 out of 5 stars. And I think I gave The Crown's Fate a 5 out of 5 stars. But yeah, this was a really good second book, and there are just a few things that I had issues with. I didn't really like the love triangle that happened in this book. It was between the Tsar, Vika, and Nikolai. I kind of just thought that was added just to, have it in there. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this if you are looking for a new fantasy duology. Once again, I don't know if this is going to be a trilogy, but I think it is a really good duology, and I think it can stand as a duology. This book I read was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I read this book because from Book Roast hosts a reading group on Goodreads. She has people vote on a book in a specific category, and The Hate You Give won for the month of March. And I was really excited because I've been wanting to read this book. It was really hyped up last year, but I just haven't brought myself to pick it up because I am not really a contemporary reader. I like adult contemporaries more than I do young adult because I feel there's more complexities in adult contemporaries, but this one definitely stood out from a lot of the young adult contemporaries that I've seen. This book follows Star Carter, who witnesses her friend getting shot by a police officer, and it kind of just follows the events after that and shows her struggles of deciding if she wants to speak out of this horrible thing that happened. She doesn't know if she wants to speak out on it or if she just wants to hide in the shadows. But she also struggles with living in the town she is in called Garden Heights. There's a lot of drug gangs, and her dad has been in and out of jail almost her entire life. And even her friend who was shot was a possible drug dealer. So she really struggles connecting with her home, and also struggles with her school because she goes to a predominantly white school. She is dating a white male, which her father really doesn't like. I really enjoyed this book because of all the things that Angie tackles, and she doesn't hide from anything, which is kind of refreshing, especially in the young adult contemporaries. And while I didn't really think that her writing style was anything special, I I did think she really did a good job of writing like the family dynamics. I loved Star's family and her relationship with her family, especially her parents. I feel that parents in young adults are either dead or they are just non-existent or they're actually horrible. But I loved her parents. They were really fleshed out and complex, and which is something that you don't see very often in contemporaries. So I really like that aspect of it, and I just thought she did a really good job at telling Star's story in the sort of Black Lives Matter inspired book. And I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read in the month of March was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This was actually a reread for me. This is one of my all-time favorite books. And after reading The Hate You Give, I was really in the mood to read The Outsiders because they kind of have similar topics. And this book follows a 14-year-old pony boy who lives in a small town of Oklahoma where there are 2 different sides of this town. You are either a greaser, which is what pony boy is, who live in a rundown part of town, and they kind of always have to live on the edge of their seat because they might be jumped or even killed by the Soches, who are the rich kids of this town. They have money, tough cars, and madras, and all of that. And this is actually set in the span of 2 weeks of Ponyboy's life, where one night his best friend Johnny actually murders a boy from the south side, the Soches. Their life kind of turns upside down. They have to run away for a week and until things cool down, and just a lot of things happen from there. Once again, I said this is one of my favorite books. It is really short, but it definitely packs a punch. Hinton tackles a lot on social class differences, which I really enjoyed, but she also tells a coming of age story, and it's just a really good book. I really loved it the second time around. This is actually the first time I've read it since reading it in middle school, and I've watched the movie countless of times, and I actually thought the movie was a really good adaptation of this. It was kind of like a perfect adaptation of this book. But yeah, the main reason why I love this book was because of the characters. You really feel for the greasers, but you also kind of feel for the Soches too. Especially with Cherry and Valance and Randy. Cherry was actually the girlfriend of the boy who was murdered by Johnny, and Randy was his best friend. So you kind of feel their pain as along with feeling the pain of the greasers when they realize that their friend who they really care about has just murdered someone. But yeah, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I would highly recommend it if you haven't read it. This is one of my favorite contemporary novels, and it's actually considered a young adult novel because Ponyboy is 14 and a lot of them, the oldest I think is 18. Ponyboy's older brother Derry. But it has really good family dynamics such as Hate You Give, and I think there are a lot of similarities between The Hate You Give and The Outsiders. Those are all the books that I read in the month of March, and I had a really good reading month. As you can see, all of the books that I read I gave 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. There's only one book that I gave a 3.5, and that was Colliding Skies, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I would say my favorite books that I read were The Outsiders, The Hate You Give, and Vicious. Yeah, so with that being said, I will get straight into my April TBR for the OWLS ReadAthon. And if you are interested in participating in this readathon, I will link G's announcement video down below. It has, like I said, it has already started, but you can definitely still start because it's only the second day of the readathon. So for April, as I said, I am participating in G from Book Rose OWLS ReadAthon, which basically is a readathon based on the OWLS examinations, and there are 12 different categories or classes that you can take, and for however many books you get a certain grade. The highest grade you can get is if you read 5 or more books, so that is how many I chose for this readathon. So yeah, let's just start talking about the books that I'll be reading. The first book that I'm going to read is Zenith by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings for astronomy, which is to read as sci-fi. This book follows our main character, Andromeda Rosella, who is also known as the Bloody Baroness, but on her starship, and she is just the captain of an all-girl crew and is just known as Andy. But during a mission that goes awry, she actually stumbles upon a bounty hunter from her past, and at the same time a leader from another planet has this plan to destroy the galaxy of Mirabal and to tear it in half into two. I'm really excited to get into Zenith. I'm actually on chapter 7 already, and I just thought this would be a good sci-fi to read because even though it is long, it is very fast-paced. So yeah, that is the first book I plan to read during this readathon. Second category that I picked was divination, which is to read a book that has some sort of prophecy. So I decided to go with The Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the second book of the Raven cycle, and in the first book, our main character has always been told that she will cause her true love to die, which to me counts as a prophecy. She meets a group of boys called the Raven Boys who go to the private Agliombi school and goes on an adventure to find a Welsh king. And if they actually find this dead Welsh king, he will grant them a wish. And this second book actually closely follows the character Ronan Parrish. And I'm really excited to get into his story because the last book kind of ends in his perspective. And it kind of reveals something that is very interesting. So yeah, I am really excited to read this for divination. The third book that I picked is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and this is for charms, which is to read a fantasy. This is actually an urban fantasy, and it follows our main character, Richard Mayhew, who is a young London businessman, and one day he decides to help this young girl in just an act of kindness, but then gets thrust into another London, a London down below our London. This London is actually called Neverwhere, and this land is a London of shadows and darkness and has monsters and magic monsters and saints and murderers and angels. I haven't read too many Neil Gaiman books. I read American Gods and I wasn't really a big fan of it, but this one just really intrigues me. It kind of seems like it'll be similar to A Darker Shade of Magic, but more of like an urban fantasy. I'm just really interested in seeing what this London Below is all about. The fourth book that I chose is this big, huge guy, and that is A Plague of Giants by Kevin Hearn. I actually got this book in a Page Habit box that my friend sent me. I'm going to be reading this book for Care of Magical Creatures, which is to read a book about magical creatures or with a magical creature on the cover. This book obviously is centered around giants. I don't know a whole lot about this book, just that there is a war between different giants in this land of 6 nations, and I think it is told in 3 different perspectives. But yeah, I'm really interested in getting into this one. I really love the cover, and what's really cool about this copy is that it has annotations from the author. Those little post-it notes are actually handwritten annotations from the author, so those will be really interesting to get into. And yeah, we'll actually see how far I get into this. I might pick this one up last because it's really large, but nonetheless, I'm really excited to get into this one. The last book that I have, I actually don't have a physical copy with me because I'll be reading it on my Kindle, is Cloaked in Shadow by Ben Alderson. This book will count towards Transfiguration, which is to read a book about transfiguration or shape-shifting, or a book with a cat on the cover. As far as I know, Cloaked in Shadows has or deals with shapeshifters, so I thought this would be the perfect book to read. It follows our main character Zachariah, and he is kind of thrust into this magical kingdom of elves who have shape-shifting powers, and this land is not as what it seems, and he actually himself in a clash of a war between the 3 continents of Thessalina, and so it kind of has similar vibes of A Plague of Giants. So I am really excited to get into that one. It is written by Ben Alderson, who is another booktuber. I'm really excited to see what his writing style is like. And also Zenith is written by 2 booktubers as well, so it'll be interesting to see their different writing styles. These are all the lovely books that I will be reading for the OWLS Readathon, and definitely let me know down below if you will be participating, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a lovely day. And I also want to say thank you all for the very warm welcomes when I posted my BookTube movie tag. It was really amazing to see all the support from this community that I love so much. So I will see you later, and happy reading. Bye!